Hi all. In this lecture, we are going to discuss dynamic RAM cell, which is included in the syllabus KTU CS202 Computer Organization Architecture, Module 4. A dynamic RAM cell is implemented using a capacitor transistor logic. We have a single capacitor and a transistor for implementing a dynamic RAM cell. And it works on the principle so that the capacitor have a property that it can hold some amount of charge for a short period of time. And the dynamic RAM cell stores binary information in the form of stored charge on the capacitor. And the capacitor in each dynamic RAM cell discharges slowly over a period of time. Hence, the contents must be periodically refreshed so that the data will not be lost. We want to refresh the contents of the capacitor in a regular interval of time or periodically so that it have the voltage remain the same constant. And the refresh operation thus refresh all the cell in a particular row at once. There is n number of memory elements is connected to a single word line. All the cells in the single word line is refreshed at same time, and the data is read by the bit line. We can see how the transistor dynamic RAM cell works. When we enable the word line, this transistor will work as an short circuit. Then the bit line or sense or read circuit senses the voltage in the capacitor. The voltage in the capacitor is transferred to the bit line. If we have a positive voltage, say +5 in the capacitor, then the data bit is read as 1. If the voltage of a capacitor is 0, then the bit line reads it as 0. Hence, capacitor will hold either +5 volt or 0 volt, and the bit line or sensor circuit will sense the charge in the capacitor, and the corresponding data is read. And the content is also refreshed when the data is read or write. Here we want to see few points. Dynamic RAM cell is implemented using a capacitor logic, and since the capacitor will degrade its voltage over a period of time, we must refresh the capacitor periodically so that the data is kept for the long time, and we will read the data using a transistor logic. This figure is shown to differentiate between a dynamic RAM cell and a static RAM cell. The dynamic RAM cell is implemented using a single transistor and a capacitor, but the static RAM cell is using 2 inverter gates. Each inverter gates is implemented using a few number of transistors. Then the dynamic RAM cell is broadly classified into synchronous dynamic RAM and asynchronous dynamic RAM. Synchronous dynamic RAM basically works on the system clock. It works synchronously with the processor. And asynchronous dynamic RAM requires few signals which is generated by some unit. Again, we have a modification in the synchronous dynamic RAM which is called double data rate synchronous dynamic RAM. It is also called DDR ST RAM. This is the type of RAM which is used in our computers or laptops. The DDR SDRAM, we have for a single clock pulse. Usually the data is in synchronous dynamic RAM is synchronized within using a clock pulse. If we have it have both rising edge and falling edge. If the data is read in both rising edge and falling edge, then it is said to be dynamic double data rate dynamic RAM. The data is read in both the rising edge and falling edge, then it is said to be dynamic RAM and double data rate RAM. Then here the arrangement is also in a such a way that it is organized into two different banks, so that one bank is read on the rising edge and the another bank is read on the falling edge.